special topic today. So Black history, really just honoring the legacy of Black midwives in the United States, as well as here locally in Vegas. Today, I brought some notes like I always do. And I'm reading this really great book because we knew we wanted to focus on Black history. I'm Jazmyne.
Sherry. I'm Erica.
And this is Delivered. We're delivering mothers, midwives, and magic. And when we were setting up our schedule and spending a good chunk of time on it, doing some research and finding out about Black midwives, because as a Black midwife, I didn't necessarily come into this space like, yeah, I want to follow this legacy, this legacy of Black midwives in America. It was an opportunity for me to have a career. It was an opportunity for me to leave a legacy for my daughters. Having two daughters, I had to sit with that, especially learning from a white woman and being in Vegas where the Black midwives are not credentialed. The Black midwives here are lay midwives. I think we have maybe one or two CNMs, but I don't have the opportunity to necessarily mingle with them or learn from them or be mentored by them. There was some sitting with this that I had to do in preparing for these episodes, which I'm really, really glad that I did. I do want to honor this space that I'm in. And as a Black woman, we were just talking about how we dress and everything like that. But in every situation that I go into, I am representing African Americans and African American culture and what that means to me. So I do want to come at this in a space of honoring the Black midwives who have come before me, for sure. I did some research. Unfortunately, when you think about Black lives, it starts at slavery in most of our history books. But when we take it back before Black people, Africans were brought to the United States, there is this really rich history around what midwifery looked like, around what birthing babies looked like. There was this female space, right? There were these really great traditions around herbology, around the birthing space, around who could come in. And I love that in our practice, we do invite the family to be a part of this birthing space. But traditionally, birthing spaces were all female. And so just doing the research and exploring the role of before we were brought to the United States and how the midwives in the South, in the rural South, played such a big part, not only for other Black women, but also for white women. We were catching all the babies. Realizing this, doing this research, it really put me in a space of gratitude. I get to be in this space of legacy that's not talked about a lot, like finding books and stuff, was a little bit difficult, but just getting the records and going through and just being grateful. It put me in a space of gratitude. It really, really did. Talking about historical foundations, of course, like I said, when we talk about anything Black, we talk about starting from when we got here in the United States, some of the traditions that I really liked. And the one I found everywhere that I didn't know about was this birth fire, was this fire that was in the room, this fire that would burn until baby was born. Now, we all know how long labors can last, right? Sometimes we're in there for days. And so this thing was symbolic of life that was happening and this rebirth and the cycle of life that we get in fire. That part really stuck out to me because that was one of the traditions that was brought over from Africa, was this birth fire. Not plantation homes, but definitely in the cottages where the enslaved were. There was a birth fire when babies were being born. And again, it would last from the start of labor, active labor when we couldn't be out in the fields anymore, and then until baby was born. And those ashes were symbolic, this life and rebirth. The phoenix has been really important to me lately too. The ashes of dying and starting over again were really important. Another was, and we do honor this, is working with the placenta. The tradition that I found was not necessarily ingesting it, but more like burying it and protecting. In that burial, it was protecting the mother who had just given birth to this baby. I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, there's the herbology piece. Midwives, we've always been the healers, because in these rural areas, these people couldn't afford to go to the doctor. So it wasn't just around having babies. It was about any ailment that was happening. Oh, I'm dizzy. Oh, this is happening. That's happening. It was like, okay, call a midwife. It wasn't just about, I'm about to have this baby, call a midwife. It was, this is what's wrong. This is what's going on with my baby, or my little toddler or me. This is what's happening. So call this woman who's really knowledgeable. And then there's tinctures and herbs that are healing. I really love those components in doing this research.
Do you think when you are talking about the ceremony, right? The ceremony part, find so much beauty in it. I feel like nowadays, when you think about modern culture and modern society, how do we bring back ceremony and tradition? How do we do that in a way where we don't feel like we're playing pretend? As I hear your story, I think, gosh, that's lovely to do. I don't want to appropriate that, but
No.
how do we as women in this field step back in tradition and culture? It just seems like a lot of midwifery is becoming more about meeting the medical world where they sit, right? And kind of losing some of the tradition and the culture.
I think the fire brings up something else, at least for me, is that 40 days postpartum that women used to get in certain cultures and in indigenous societies and villages. Like the woman who just had the baby,
Yeah.
she's being cared for by the rest of the women in her village. If she has other children and a partner,
Yeah.
they are being cared for. And I think it starts with that fire. They build this fire, and the fire is going until the baby's born. The ashes mean something, the placenta means something, and yet the women in the village, it's not like the woman has a baby and they all go.
So that's
Still
what,
there.
like when we go to a birth, it's the two of us holding space,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes there are other females in their life holding space, but we don't live in the same kind of village arena where we can just take a bike over to so and
Right.
so or walk over. We have to actually have resources. We have to have a car. We have to have money just to show up for another human. And I think our society, that separation between children not being heard and seen changed things in the 50s here for us. Just this idea, because the white women were having the black women nurse their kids, raise their kids, and care for their kids. And
Sure.
so even if those white women were going to a doctor, they were coming home and they were relying on the black culture to kind of take care of them. Then those black women were going home and actually giving their kids what was left over from that, right? But I love what you're saying. And just this idea that women coming together, supporting each other and being patient with one another. Like, how do you do this when a woman has to go back to work after 3 days?
Our society doesn't necessarily support this tribal type of birth space. It just doesn't. Or even just way of life where we can sit with one another. I'm reading Listen to Me Good, the story of an Alabama midwife. This is Margaret Charles Smith's biography written with Linda James Holmes. One of the stories she talks about, not necessarily birth related, was that in death or sickness, if someone was ailing, somebody would sit there. They would take shifts. So if somebody was in bed, they're laid up, they can't do anything. They take shifts and they take care of that family, right? They take care of these other people who need support as well. And then the next day, somebody else is there. The next day, somebody else is there. And our society just doesn't support that tribal effect that we really, really want. I think that's what people are craving though. Because a client the other day was just talking about the 40 days and 40 nights thing. And she was asking, can my husband bring the baby instead of me because she wants to be in bed? And there is this space where I love that tradition. And we hear a lot about it in other cultures as well, where it's still being practiced. It's so hard.
I remember having a Chinese woman and her mother was putting a lot of pressure on her for that 40 days. She was struggling because she's like, this isn't how I live my life on the day to day. I'm not used to this self-care. I'm not used to choosing me.
But
I'm
again,
not
that's how our
willing.
society has set it.
How do you in modern day society go, I'm taking 40 days off and you don't lose your job? You know what I mean? Like the consequences, like
But people don't do it.
they
People
can't afford it because it's not like they're on
because our
paid
society
leave.
is not set up in a way that we can.
We're not broodmares. Like that's not how we should be living our lives. But for those of us who have had children, I can't speak for you guys, but I know that for me, once the first week of postpartum went by, I have never felt so alone in my life. Once the first week of postpartum went, I tell this to my clients, ain't nobody coming to see you. They're not coming to see you. They're coming to see your baby. They're coming to hold your baby. Come and eat your food. and drink your beverages and hold your baby. No one is coming to see you. I tell my clients there's power in the word no as a complete sentence, but our society has created this situation so that once the visitors all have come and, all of this fanfare about this new life, which is important. Yes, it's a new life and it's important. No one is thinking of that woman who birthed that baby. And once everybody goes back to their lives to do what they need to do, nobody is thinking about that woman except maybe her midwife. Hey, how you doing? I'm going to come and see you. I want to stop by and check on you and see how you're doing. And
Questions I get back from women are, when can I go back to the
the
gym?
gym. That drives me
Well, no,
crazy.
it hurts my heart
That
because
too.
I have had doula clients that have done elective cesareans because their partners
Want a tummy tuck.
don't want anything messed up down there.
What?
I've had no less than 3 where they were dual clients and the partner went, you know what? I don't want to see something come out of there. That's not me, I guess. And I'm worried about you tearing, not functioning, not being normal again. So the cesarean makes more
And
sense.
how patriarchal is that? Which brings us to the husband stitch.
Right.
That's disgusting.
And I do want to bring us back to this idea of you talking about the grand midwives, right? I shared some stuff on my page about that because I opened up the local chapter for NACPM, the National Association of Certified Professional Midwives, and they were having this really big annual meeting, and it was back in the Washington, D.C. area. When we went back to address some things because Black and brown humans die at a much higher rate. That was a topic of conversation, but it was more about legislation. When we went back there, we had all of these Black organizations that were there representing, and they felt some kind of way. Those of us going had no idea about this, but the previous year, they held a conference at a plantation and it never got addressed. So then all of a sudden I go to this conference, and what we did is we roundtabled the rest of the conference because we're like, we have other things to talk about. Forget legislation.
Yeah.
How can we talk about legislating and validating what we do when we're not even recognizing the harm that we are doing in our current practice, in our current language, in our current, and because we're not thinking about those things. So we have to, I think, have that diversity, right? So like me, I'm scared to be a white preceptor to you as a Black woman, right? Because we're both doing the work, but it
There
was nice to go
culturally,
back
there are
and
things
there
that are
were
different.
grand Black midwives there who were then telling us stories, right? It's just about storytelling. This is our story. This is what we've done. This is what we've been doing all along. This
And that's how it gets
conversation you're
passed
having
down.
now, we've been having this conversation for a lot longer than
Lot
you.
longer. Yeah.
We've been around doing this, taking care of our own because we had no choice. And so I do think bringing it back to this idea of, I like this word legacy that you use because I think stepping into it and you feeling a sense of gratitude in that, I imagine. And what a gift I see you with your girls and I see them watch you and I see how proud they are of you. And what I see you do is pave a way for them, maybe not even to step into midwifery, but whatever they feel passionate about, you're telling them, I, as a Black woman, am capable of making decisions and holding other Black women up. And I think that's really beautiful to witness. But I saw that in Washington, D.C. I saw the disconnect between the Black and white worlds.
I remember that. I
You
remember
know,
thinking about it.
it was a huge, I called you. There we were up in Oregon, I think. We were doing NARM stuff. And I think we were FaceTime or Snapchatting. And it was probably one of the hardest experiences I've ever had in my life. But I have nothing but, you said, gratitude going through it because I needed to be woken up. Because I think a lot of white women kind of put our head down. So we think we're doing okay. We think we're doing good. We've never been mean to anybody inadvertently, But I think most of us weren't doing the work. I remember Jolena Simpson one time posting a photo of us, all the midwives, and somebody going, "Where's the diversity?"
Wow.
And me going, "Yeah, there aren't any Black birth professionals in the Valley." Do you remember? I'm like, "There aren't any. You're it, Jolena." And
You step back.
we worked together. And well, she had gone through something personal. And I was like, "Oh," and I'm going there. And she goes, "Sherry, just look at who you're surrounded by." And it was a hard message, but I had nothing but the most gratitude for her because she didn't have to do that for me. She didn't have to hold that space for me. And the fact that she had that intention of going, Sherry, look around you. You can do better. And then I did. And I'm still trying. I still have so much far to go. But I had no idea. I had been living my life just going along, not aware of the community, the culture, that I shouldn't, do things better. It was a big deal for me because I looked at it and immediately my hands kind of went, there's no Black birth professionals to hire. This isn't on me. This isn't my problem. For the white woman, this isn't my problem. Right. I
Mhm.
couldn't help but think that way. Nobody had ever opened my eyes to this next move. And so I'm learning now, but I think it's easier for a white woman to just walk away because it's a scary, messy thing that you're going to make a lot of mistakes at. You're going to do it wrong a lot of times. You're going to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing.
There's an underlying fear there, an underlying anxiety. What am I going to do? Or what am I going to say that's not going to be right? That's going to be misconstrued? Like something we could say innocently and having
Well,
someone
because what does
like
doing the work mean? It looks a little bit different for
for everybody.
everybody, right?
Exactly.
Doing the work,
Exactly.
doing the work.
It's different.
I remember, and I wished I could remember the analogy, but there was a woman who talked about Black babies drowning in the river. And this is what the white woman's doing. This is what the doctors are doing. This is what and she's like, this is what we need though. So just back off. We know our problems. We know what we need. Support us and lift us up so that we can do what we need to do. When I came back here, I was like, okay, I want to be part of this movement. I want to do better. I remember meeting with a lot of newer Black humans in the community going, okay, how do we get this going? How do we? And then they went, you know what? We're going to do this. And I went, oh, yeah. Why do I even have to be involved in this? Okay, you just let me know what you need and I will send money. I will share it. I will support it. But I learned to not be that white savior. I thought because I had Black grandchildren, I have Black children who've married into my family. I thought, oh my gosh, you're fine. You're surrounded by all these humans. And then I learned what being a nice white woman was. And it was like, holy crap, holy crap. But it wasn't until I decided to wait and to look around. I had to decide that for myself. I had to say, I want to do different. I want to be better. But I saw several of the partners I worked with were like, nah, we don't like the direction you're going.
Which speaks more about them.
I'm okay with feeling uncomfortable, or at least I want to get better at feeling uncomfortable.
I was in an
For sure.
appointment the other day, and the woman, the client was talking about, she's a doula in the Valley, and she was talking about how when she is asked about midwives, she always gives a list because she doesn't want to exclude anyone. I said, that is a really great thing because we have a fairly large group of midwives here in the
Yeah.
Valley. I think that's really awesome because we're all different. Sherry and I are different. Jazmyne and I are different. Jazmyne and Sherry are different. And that's the beauty of the midwifery community is that there's a lot of us, but we're not the right midwife for everybody because midwifery isn't cookie cutter care. We tailor our care to the individual human. So if Stacy Smith comes in and hires me, Jenny Jones may not want to hire me. She might want to hire Jazmyne. It's important to say that every midwife in this community offers something to the community. And it's important, I feel like, to say that because I don't think we speak highly enough about each other anyway. But I think it's important to say that there are some really amazing midwives in this valley. Amazing midwives who aren't sitting here. I mean, we're pretty cool. We're pretty awesome, but we have a great community. It's important to show respect for each other and what we do, because in the end, we're all trying to do the same things. So I think to bring it back to what we're talking about,
Yeah.
I think the more midwives, who was it who said, train a million midwives? Vicky
Vicky
Penwell.
Penn.
Train a million Black midwives, train a million Jewish midwives, train a million Hispanic midwives. The more people who become midwives from other cultures only benefits everybody. And I'm going to stop my rant. So I'm done.
Well, what I can't help but think about is I remember as we were continuing the discussions, back when this was going on, we were talking about resources and childcare and how could you be in an apprenticeship and how do you have money to get yourself through. And I think as a white woman, I didn't, even though my life felt hard to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when all of a sudden this word privilege came around, all of a sudden these words start coming around, I had to go, ugh, ugh, oh, what? Why do I, am I privileged? I've had a hard life. Have I had a hard life? Well, comparatively, all I know is my circle. And so that the moment you open your eyes and you start listening to stories, the storytelling, right? That's what's so beautiful about our humanity, the stories we all have to tell. You can kind of go, oh, I do have a lot of privilege. I do have a lot of resources at my disposal. But do I want to be made uncomfortable? Do I want to go without so somebody that else can come, can go with? And I think that's the part that was really, that made the biggest impact on me. There was a woman who got up and I think she was Polynesian, I think, but she was talking about like how do we give restitution? We start by honoring those who have gone before. We start not allowing that whitewashed
Mm-hmm.
history to happen. And so we tell all the stories of the Black midwives or the African American midwives who have been doing this the longest. They have the most to share. They have the most experience, knowledge, power, and we give them that honor and we um, feel that privilege of learning from, but giving them the floor to tell their story.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. We talk about midwives and how we used to be the main care providers when it came down to maternity services. And then in the late, 19th century, hospitals and doctors became more prevalent. Then there was this pushing out of midwives, especially Black midwives, because that's who have been serving people. We're talking about the rural South. I learned about the Shepherd-Towner Act.
Reading about that.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
this was it was a federal legislative act that gave funding to impoverished communities that could not afford to go into hospitals because we were finding that the maternal and infant mortality rate was very, very high. And so we were trying to combat that. It only lasted between 1921 and 1929, so only 8 years. It didn't get refunded. This took midwives out of the picture. It definitely lowered the number and put more Black women and poor people in general in hospitals. And then that is when the uptick of infant and maternal mortality went even higher.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's why it was stopped or why it was defunded, but there was this space where I was like, okay, did this do more harm or did it help a little? Like in what ways could it have helped? But the infant and maternal mortality rate did rise. It's gone down most recently because there is this upsurgence of, well, I don't want to go to the hospital. I want to have a doula. I want to have a midwife. So I think when we're talking about community and people getting back to this space of tribalism or even just going the holistic route, it is because, well, first, I think it's trendy, right? Like having a midwife and having a doula. You hear people say, yeah, well, my friend, she had a midwife and she had a doula and she had twinkle lights and her space was really nice and all of this. Hey, I love that you're learning about this holistic space because of that. I think a good number of those people who are coming back to midwifery and the traditional way of doing things are doing so because there is this white coat syndrome. Black people have never wanted to go into the hospitals because back in slavery days, we were experimented on when it came to anesthesia, when it came to even a lot of the medical books now are modeled from way back when, this experimentation and medical treatment on Black people. And so I think there's just a general distrust of number one, white people, and number two, white coats, the people who are in the white coats. And so I think that has been the reason why we're moving away from this, going into the hospital. And that part I love. Not necessarily the mistrust, but the fact that we're doing the research.
Well, you're reclaiming.
Yeah, and
Right.
reclaiming something that was
Reclaiming
ours.
something that got taken.
Mhm.
And so you're reclaiming it. And I think that that's really nice. It's interesting to me, you use this word trust. I'm thinking about this word trust. And it's interesting when you go to your white coat care provider and you say, I have an issue of trust here. You're not met with, let me help you feel safe. Let's have a conversation about what you need to feel cared for. Instead,
You've put them on the defensive.
it's the I don't want to own that. And that's what I guess I was referring to. A lot of times we go, I don't want to feel like I'm part of the problem. And so just imagine like that change of going, what do you need to feel safe? What language can I use? And if some of that's going back and doing the work yourself, because, I firmly believe the oppressed shouldn't teach the oppressor how to not do that. But I feel like if physicians if they could just do their job, if it wasn't about the lawyers and the practice and this idea of wanting to, if they could just love the people, that would be one thing. But we're just not there in today's. And it makes me wish, don't you wish sometimes when you're watching a historical documentary, you go, I just want to spend one day back in that time. What did they really say? Like I watch Bridgerton. I know it's all, but don't you want to go back and go, how would people have really acted? How would that have really felt?
Yeah, unless they have indoor plumbing, I don't want to go back anywhere.
I want to just go. I want to go see like what
that's a thing for me, indoor plumbing.
Because to me, the constraints seem so far away.
Outhouses for you.
I love that. Going to Central America, that was my tricky poo.
Yeah, no.
But I think the history just feels so far removed. And it's not. The storytelling is right there. But it feels far away because we're so viewed at looking at the horizon, right? We're looking towards the future, which we should be looking toward the future. But what a disservice we do by not looking at the history.
I don't know why that reminded me of something, but I remember taking my doula training because a really good friend of mine, she's my sister. I don't remember meeting this woman out here in Vegas. She had a beautiful pregnancy, but her labor and delivery sucked. So I'm like, okay, I need to get into this birthwork thing. I had been told already that I should be a doula. So I'm doing my doula training and it's online, but it's live. And I'm meeting all of these different people. And there was an RN who was in my doula training. I remember a huge part of Jonah's curriculum is understanding racism and the place that it has in our medical system. This woman, she was an RN. She'd been an RN for 15 years. We watched, what's the documentary that is on the East Coast? No. Where the Black women, they had their babies and they come back home and they're like, something's wrong, but they don't believe them. So they send them back home and they ended up dying.
Oh,
we're going to have to.
Yes, I know which documentary you're talking about. And I'm drawing a blank because I watched it.
We watched this called Aftershock. And so that was one of our assignments that we had to watch. So I'm watching this and I'm like, oh my God, I had my kids in the hospital. I never felt this because I'm a Black woman, I'm being treated differently.
I never felt that. The statistics from Oklahoma blew my mind.
I never felt that.
Do you remember that from that?
So it really was shocking. This white woman, I believe I want to say she was in the Midwest somewhere. She'd been an RN for a really long time. We come back after watching this and she goes, I had no idea that this was a thing, that people being treated differently in the hospital was because of the color of their skin. And I didn't realize that it was set up that way. In my ignorance, I'm like, well, how could you not, especially after being in this space for so long? She told us, she was like, yeah, in our books, it says that Black people feel pain differently, that they have a higher tolerance of pain.
They used to say that about redheads too.
That the way that they feel pain is differently. And I'm like, well, duh, slavery. Like, there's so much going through my head. And at this point, I hated this woman. I did not know her. I cannot remember her name for the life of me right now. But we did breakout groups. And of course, she was in my group, right? And so
that's the universe.
We get in there and we start talking. And I'm just like, I'm looking at my computer. How have you gone all of this time knowing that you're getting this information? How do you actually believe this? She was very vulnerable. I got to be very vulnerable. But it was this space like understanding that racism is in almost every part of the United States and it's in our history. And so many different institutions that we live by, you have to understand the history of all of that in order to want to do the work or to even understand that this is something that someone is experiencing differently than you. I don't know why it made me think of that, but I watched this and I went through that training and I did get to see a different side of someone who was privileged and didn't have to think about the things that I had to think about. And I had to come back and be like, okay, I can understand that. But this is what it really is. I had a friend at the same time who was a nurse in the ER. And I go to him and I go, is this what you're taught? Like, is this really what you're taught, that Black people feel pain differently? And he was like, yeah, now if Black people or any Black or brown people are coming in and they're saying they're in pain, it's because they want drugs. I go, shut up. Shut shut up. Like, I just couldn't fathom it. That made this doula journey, this birth work journey so much more important for me, right? Even then, not necessarily connecting the dots that this is a legacy I wanted to leave for my kids. But that was a huge part of my beginning to wanting to be a birth worker. It was the fact that in these hospitals, Black people are treated differently. That's why there has been this upsurgence of wanting this more holistic space where people are valued.
Uh-huh. I was thinking too, like, when I entered this, I took on a midwife client, and she was a young Black girl who, against her will, got pregnant in high school. She came to me, and her mom were talking to me. I remember when she went into labor, she was at her aunt's house. Her aunt was an actor, ET channels, and I can't remember what show she was in. But here, nice house, what appears as resources, like no, but we're not talking like they didn't have money, right? Like that's what we think is right. We think marginalized people, it's just they don't have access to money. And that's just, they had that. But then they started, while this young girl was laboring, they started telling their stories. And her mother had lost babies because the hospitals, she wasn't from Vegas, but she'd had babies that were sick. And she'd go to the hospital and they'd send her babies who died. I'm thinking in my brain, what year did this happen? This is where my brain goes because I'm so caught up in my own thinking. And what's crazy is this young girl, her blood pressure was high. We had to transfer. I remember the EMTs coming to the house and the mom going, what hospital are we going to? And what if they turn us away? Like I got turned away. And I said, they're not allowed to turn you away. They're not allowed to turn you away. Any hospital in Vegas has to take you. They cannot turn you away. So we put her daughter in an ambulance, and then I got in my car, and her mom got in her car, and we followed to the hospital. I called the head of the hospital and talked to them. They knew what to expect. The next call I get is from the mom. They beat me there. And the mom goes, they're turning her away. They said they don't want to take care of her. My brain went, what? Has never happened. I have served at this point hundreds of families, and I've never, ever been turned away by a hospital. They didn't want to deal with it as they were sending her away. I had to call precious Dr. Wilkes. I said, this is happening. He goes, I gotcha. Dr. Adishak marched out to that ER, showed up. I was sitting in the waiting room, and I had already gotten
Your butt chewed?
oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
by the
Gotta
doctor,
love that.
by
Oh,
the
we love
doctor that was
that.
on call that took her because
That
I
didn't wanna take her.
that didn't want to take her.
Was it a woman?
Nope, it was a white guy.
Oh, okay. Because there's a woman at
I can tell
Centennial
you
who
it was
does that.
later,
Yeah.
but he is screaming at me, and I hear him screaming behind the doors about me. I know he is so mad at me that I've made him take this girl who is seizing because her blood pressure is so high. And I'm thinking, please just save this woman's life.
Save her life. Yeah.
And Dr. Adishak came marching through the thing, and the relief that went through my body going, he will make sure she's safe. He will fight for her. He will take care of her. And I ended up going back and even talking to the doctor who saved her life, and he apologized, whatever. But in my brain, I just didn't think that happened. I didn't think it was real. I thought maybe it happened to, in my brain, marginalized meant low income. And so to see that not just good old fashioned racism, didn't matter what income bracket you were in, didn't matter what.
Well,
he
think
didn't
of what
wanna
happened to
deal with
Serena
it.
Williams.
Yeah.
She had to self-diagnose herself.
Yeah.
That is unconscionable.
And everybody just kept going, that's
It's
a Black genetic trait or whatever.
It's not.
I know. And so I just think of that. And I think the reason there's so many reasons this is relevant today, but I think what's interesting to me is when I would have this happen and I have this awakening moment, I go to other white women and I go, this happened. And they go, no, it didn't. And I go, no, 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 no. I saw this. And they go, no, it didn't. So I guess that would be my message at the end of the day. It's happening. It's alive and well. It's something that is still in 2025. Because I'll go watch films from the 70s or the 60s and they're having the same damn discussion. Why are we still talking about this? Why is this still an issue?
Women are still being treated as second, third, fourth class citizens in medical care.
Oh, and a Black woman? Oh my
It,
gosh.
it hasn't
right?
changed.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed. It's been like this. We're 2025. Just think back to 1925. That is only 100 years ago, which is mind boggling to me because I'm an old lady. Women were being treated the exact same way, not being taken seriously. And this is white women. So if you bring it down to Black women, Hispanic women, or even back then, Irish women,
I've seen Asian women.
Asian women, like they are going to,
Especially if you don't speak English.
or if you don't speak English clearly,
Especially if you
any
don't
kind
speak
of an
English.
accent. If you have any kind of an accent, with the exception if you sound Anglo. If you sound Anglo, they're going to take care of you. But if you sound any different, if you sound like you're from the South, or if you sound like you're from a shtetl in Eastern Europe, they're going to turn you away. Made of stronger stock than that, you're going to be fine. Oh, you don't have preeclampsia. You just have thick ankles. Like, those are the kinds of things that we're battling, and it's exponentially worse when you're a marginalized
because nobody's
community.
talking about it, right?
Nobody's talking
People
about
are
it.
talking about it now, though, and that's what and I mean, just to bring it all back, and that's that movie, Aftershock, right? I watched this, and my mind is blown. Like my mind is blown.
I cried.
As a Black woman, I cried
cried.
the whole time.
I cried. I watched it twice. I think I
will.
cried more the second
will.
time than I did the first time.
And so that definitely brings me here, being a Black woman, being a Black midwife, and knowing and being proud that, we've been talking to Jelena, who is like, we need more Black midwives. That is what it is. And so we have to start, because we know that the trajectory to get Black midwives is to have Black doulas. So having the Doula Collaborative of Las Vegas, where we're training doulas and ultimately getting people in this community, making community doulas, and knowing that one day they're going to go, I want to be a midwife. I want to make my impact bigger, because that was my thing. I get to be a doula. Yeah, this is great. I get to work with these families. I get to go to the hospital and say, you're not going to talk to my client that way, or be helpful to make sure that my client is being treated in a fair way. And then I go, but I could just give a woman this opportunity to have her baby at home. As a Black midwife, that's what I could do.
Mm-hmm. And you could love
Shit.
it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like that.
So
I feel like there's
I
nothing
do
better.
think you're right. I really do love that you brought us back to the place of positivity, because back when I started, there was one Black birth professional. For home birth, there was some CNMs in the hospital, like you stated. And now, 10 years later, the community looks different. Black women did that themselves. I love that you brought that up as a positive thing, because you get together, you talk about what you deal with your clients, and I love that that's happening.
Yeah.
It is a positive movement.
We even in the doula community, much more than the midwife community, in the doula community, we have a BIPOC group, right? We come together at least once a month and talk about everything under the sun, whether it's our clients, whether it's about hospital policy. And I think that is, if we can jump to the next step around how do we revive this Black birth worker space, I think that's what it is, being in community with one another and making sure that we are talking about all of the things, making our voices heard, having these organizations that are growing more Black midwives, more other midwives of color who are going to be able to serve the people who look like them. We had this discussion earlier, right? Because we were talking about religion. I could have these religious beliefs, but do I want that to permeate my practice? Do I want to serve somebody differently because of my religion? And then I had this revelation and I'm like, well, I definitely want a Black care provider, because they understand some of the things that I'm going through. I don't know if it necessarily translates to religion, right? We're still up in the air about that. But when it
Oh, I
comes
could say a
to
lot on that.
having a care provider and having someone that looks like you, who knows your struggles, who knows some of the things that you think about, versus having someone who doesn't have that purview into your life, it makes a huge difference. So yeah, a million Black midwives, a million Irish midwives, a million Chinese, as Asian, as many midwives as can be grown, I think is where we're gonna revive these roots of people being taken care of and loved on during such a transformative time in their lives.
Yeah, there are organizations, a lot of grassroots organizations doing the work. Find those organizations. And if you have the ability to volunteer, donate, because the work is being done, they just need more
So I'm
resources.
excited because next week I'm meeting with the Southern Nevada Jewish Women's Association. I feel very alone here I feel like I'm the only Jewish person in Las Vegas. I know that's not true, but I do feel
I
like
think
that.
there's two of you. I would like two of us. I think
Um,
Jack is the other one. Oh, Dr. Broom.
or Hannah Schomer.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm just
Um,
being silly.
Shout out to Hannah. I think it's important that we network with people in our cultures, because then we can better serve our cultures. You're going to be able to better serve the Black community. I would like to be able to better serve the Jewish community. The only way to do that is to go out into our given communities and put ourselves out there and say, how can I do better? How can I be more of service? When it comes to finding a doctor, when I first moved here, I had very specific criteria for medical care. Not a single doctor in this valley met my criteria. Observant and Jewish.
One or the other? No, I mean, you found one or the other, or neither?
I didn't find any. The only Jewish doctor I found eventually was Dr. Adishak and then Dr. Bro. But other than that, and God bless them, I mean, it was very hard because on the East Coast, Jewish doctors dime a dozen. I'll take Dr. Goldstein for 25. Right? Like you could just open up the proverbial phone book and pick a doctor. But here it was really hard for me. As a Jewish woman, it was important to me to have somebody who was going to be my medical provider who understood me, like understood my little idiosyncrasies.
So I would say maybe our call to action is find out what groups and organizations are in your community. As a care provider, if someone comes your way, you know who you can refer to and turn to for information. That's one of the downfalls about kind of practicing in a bubble, which definitely midwives here in Vegas we kind of become a little reclusive and not wanting to go outside of our bubble. But I think, I think if we want to progress and improve our community, I think the call to action is find out what local organizations are in your community and support those organizations, whether that's volunteering, giving money, using their services, whatever that is. I've certainly been the only white woman at lots of events with Jazmyne, and I learn more in that culture and society, and no one makes me feel bad. And I think that's because they know what it feels like when they're in. So they're all very welcoming and sweet. I'd say the call to action is know your community, whether you're a care provider or you're that birthing human. Watch the documentaries, read the books, hear the stories so that we don't forget our history and where we came from, so that we can be reminded of where we're headed sometime. We don't even know where we're going. We're just in survival mode, and I can appreciate that. But we can't spend our entire life in survival mode. At some point, we have to take stock of what we're doing and make conscious and intentional decisions and choices.
That was very choicey of you.
Thank you.
So that we can thrive, right? You have survival, and then I want the thriving part.
Done with the survival part. And I
Well,
want the
when you're
people
stuck in
around me to
survival,
survive.
you're stuck in your story. I'm going to go choicey now. When you are in survivor mode, you are stuck in your stories and you can't get out of your head. So I think that's important. We need to be able to learn how to move past that, 100% of the time. And I think that that's hard sometimes because
Which you have to put yourself out. And I know Brene Brown always talks about stepping into the arena. And that's really hard to do, especially if you've had some shit thrown at you. You know what I mean? Like you've had tomatoes thrown at you. Then you go, and then you become this recluse. And then you go, I really screwed this up and I maybe don't know how to fix this or write this. How do I gather up my guts and step back out there again. I
Well, and I
think
think it's
that's where
hard
the
when you have
growth
an
and the progress
unforgiving
happens.
community. Like if you make one misstep, your community is like, "Ah," which is why I think a lot of us become reclusive.
There's a lot of reasons
Yeah.
why we get afraid. Sometimes for me, I don't want to do more harm. And
Right.
until I step back and do the work, then I can step forward. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that, humans have to be in survival mode. I think that was the hardest thing about COVID. For me, sometimes in my life, even if I struggled, when I saw other people around me doing okay, that gave me some sense of like things are going to be okay. I had hope. And then COVID happened. I think all kind of fell apart, and
Man.
all the things that weren't working had a flashlight shine on it. Hey, this thing we've been ignoring, that's not working. Hey, this life we're living, this isn't working. And so I looked around me and went, oh my gosh, nobody around me is doing well either. Can we all agree that this current system isn't working? Can we break maybe some of these patterns and do better? But it does take a level of vulnerability. And what doing the work means, it means watching the documentaries, reading the books, getting out of the house, going to the groups, the organizations, the rallies, listen to the TED Talks, listen to and just
But
let you
also
become
talking,
informed.
just talking to other
Talking to
people.
other people. Because when our clients come to us, they tell us their story and we get a peek into their life, regardless. We get a moment of their life, and you don't know most of what's going on in that household. We just had a woman come into my office, and her kid is 12 weeks, 10 weeks, and her partner left her and is suing for full custody. And you didn't see some of that behind the scenes stuff. And so now she's in this situation. And who does she call? You, right? And we've talked about this, Sherry. Can I meet with you? And it was that day. A lot is happening in my life. Can you talk? And her aunt came in and we had that conversation. That happens a lot. As a midwife, that grand midwife that took care of the community, I think we're going to become that again, right? Because I want to do that for all the partners. I want the partners to feel heard and seen. I want the mother to feel heard and seen. I want the children to feel heard and seen. I want the animals to feel heard and seen. I want everybody who's a part of this story to feel heard and seen so they can continue to shine.
I think there's just this disregard for life, right? Because everything is just so commodified right now. Everything is about money. And when we think about these experiences that people are having, when they're not sitting in these spaces where they feel heard and seen, it's because they don't have time for the fluffy stuff. They don't have time to hear about what's going on in your life that may be attributing to your high blood pressure or whatever the case may be. They're not getting that inside scoop because they don't have the time. They're understaffed. There's insurance they have to deal with. There's all of these different things that our society is supporting that just doesn't work. It doesn't work for the community that we really need to have. What we do know works is this tribal nature that we have, that people in general want to have. We want to have connection. We want to have a space where we can sit and talk and tell our stories. Storytelling and the spoken word is such a huge part of Black culture, And so these stories that you're talking about, we get this glimpse into their lives. And they call us later about things that have nothing to do with their maternity care or their baby care or whatever that looks like. So that's so important, is that and understanding that, because that's the missing piece. That right there is the missing piece of this safe space, the fluffy stuff that we can give in midwifery.
And the conversation and kind of wanting to get into the younger and younger generation, I think, is the other part. Yesterday was my granddaughter's birthday. She turned 12. Just like granddaughter, it made me feel really old just now. We were out and I wanted to she needed some clothes. So we went to the store and she picked out an outfit shopping with the preteen. I remembered what that was all about. I had forgotten and immediately remembered, and I didn't enjoy it, but I think she did. We got up to the front and we were talking about Valentine's Day, and I said, Valentine's Day is like a Hallmark holiday to grandma, but whatever you need, baby. She says, what's a Hallmark holiday mean, grandma? And Cora looked at me. She goes, you're really going to get into that right now with her?
Sure
And I
am.
go, are you giving me permission to? Can we talk about consumerism and how it affects you? And we did with a 12-year-old, brand new 12-year-old. I can have a conversation with her. So why couldn't I have conversations with her about these other things, right? That empower her, maybe stop her from making decisions or choices, at least with a level of self-awareness. and what she's even up against, because she doesn't know. Because right now she just wants to be popular and have friends and look cute, you know? But
That's never going to change. It's
So
gonna
either.
change.
I don't think so either. But I would like to be able to reach people while they're younger when it comes to decisions about handling their menstrual cycles, handling their sex lives, handling the explorative and the discovery and the, because we're not talking about it as a society, and it's kind of silly at this point because the amount of rape, incest, unwanted pregnancies,
STIs.
STIs, abuse, and death, it's worth talking about.
Absolutely.
I have these hard conversations with my kids too. I have this different space with them, right? Because they're not here. I'm like the parent they trust. We talk about some heavy stuff sometimes, and I get chewed out sometimes by my ex because he's like, they're too young to be talking about that. But I firmly believe that if you are honest with kids, they can handle anything.
Yeah.
They can handle anything. So the Super Bowl was this Sunday, and Kendrick Lamar did the halftime show, and my oldest daughter, she's 12, and she loves SZA and she loves Kendrick Lamar. So she calls me in the morning when she's on the bus, and she's like, yeah, I keep watching the halftime show because there's a bunch of rhetoric on TikTok, on social media about the symbolism of this performance. And I haven't watched it yet. I don't care, right? I don't care about football. I used to watch the games specifically for the halftime
Or
show
the halftime
or for
show.
the commercials, right? But this time I was just like, forget it. I don't even care. I'm seeing all the things about it. She's like, yeah, I keep watching it because the symbolism of this and the symbolism of that. And I'm like, well, damn, I need to go and watch this halftime show because my kid is interested in this. I want to be able to say, yeah, I saw that. This is what it means to me. This is, as a Black woman, what it means to me. How does it make you feel? And we did talk about some of it. I want to be able to be honest with her and I have these kind of conversations. Because like I said, I talk about all of the things because you can talk to kids and they're just going to have more questions, if anything. And as adults, I think we get to like make the choice on what verbiage we use or how we do protect this, because that's what we're trying to do, right? Protect this little bit of innocence. But I say, fuck that.
Well, because a lot of the naivety is what puts them in a bad situation.
And in a space of shame. I don't want my kids to have shame about anything. And the way you remove that is giving information and talking about it. Like Brene Brown says, oh, I love me some Brene Brown. Okay. Like being able to name shame and say, this is how I felt. And because of this, is so powerful. It's empowering. It really, really is. But you don't get there until you have open and honest conversations with anybody, romantic partner, whoever. Naming that and being aware of that is super
I love
valuable.
that about your girls. I went to my first Super Bowl party this year, and the only thing I actually paid attention to was the halftime show. And I loved it. I've watched it several times now, and I'm sharing stuff on my social media. I thought it was beautiful. And it does open up dialogue and conversation.
Sure.
Which is what the piece and so even if it's kind of in a negative way, I'm okay, because I think people talking about it is important.
You have to talk.
It has to come down to that communication, right?
Because it has to be broken down.
Uncomfortable stuff. And
Yeah.
we talk about that a lot. Sometimes we can be uncomfortable. We're gonna have to have uncomfortable conversations, and that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't enjoy it. I don't do it well, but I really
like
hate
it.
it. I want to disappear. But then I leave and I digest and I process. And once I start doing the work, then it was worth that moment that I hated. You know what I mean? That moment where all of a sudden I felt stupid or shame or whatever showed up for me in my body. That made me feel bad about me, and then I went and did the work and went, oh, okay, now I understand. And then I make whatever I have to make work run. But I think our youth I just think they're going to do better than us, just like this next generation of midwives, like yourself, like us getting into that. We got into an ugly conversation about what to charge for doulas versus assistants versus midwives. And it was ugly, but it was necessary, right? Because you have to sometimes have those conversations that make you feel uncomfortable. And you go home and you think about it. And it's great because then I message the girls afterwards and we're talking and going, hey, you said this thing. It really kind of triggered me. I've been thinking about it. I see now where you're coming from, and I should have reacted this other way. And I think just putting yourself in a position where you can be vulnerable and that apologizing and admitting you don't know is okay. And I keep doing this to my husband. If he's gonna edit this video, he'll hear it. But sometimes he argues and I think, what will happen if you actually admit you're wrong right now? Third World War is
The world's gonna end.
Our bank account's gonna clear out. One of our children are gonna be taken hostage. What if you go, you know what? I was wrong. How do you feel about that? What happens? And I think that's the thing. I think shame, if we just own it and saddle up, we don't need it. It doesn't serve us. It's not good for us, but it's there and we have to have a conversation with it. We have to have a conversation with shame and say, why do I feel shame? And how can I work through this and come out on the other end of this? A better person. So next time this happens, I respond in a different way and I handle it a different way and I do better that next way because we're all here for growth. That's it. Right? We're all here to grow. That's the only thing we can all agree on is we've come here to do better. I love what we've done.
Me too.
It's a good conversation. I
That's
love
right.
you ladies so much. I really do. I
Me
feel
too.
emotional. I cried every time watching the thing, but I'm just like an emotional soul. I love the symbolism in the halftime show, and I've really dived into what that looks like because I do care about those things, and I don't always know how to be. I can tell you, like, one of the first, I used to take my kids when we were really poor and I had barely gas money. We would go to USC because USC has all these free museums. And I want to take my kids to the museum. And they have a Black History Museum there. And there was a room in there, and it looked like you were under the trees, and it had all the stories of humans around the room. And so I'm reading them out loud to my kids because they were little, and I'm reading the wall. And there was a Black woman sitting in the corner, and she was sobbing. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was supposed to do in that moment outside of when I noticed it. I had my husband take my children away because they were being kids. I had 6 of them. They're kind of a handful, but I had them take away. I wanted to go up to her, but I felt like she was in her own space. And I walked away more out of respect, giving her privacy she needed to feel whatever she felt, because what I felt big. I couldn't imagine what she felt was so much bigger. I carry her around with me in my mind and my memory. And she reminds me that there are people who've gone through much harder things than me. And so when I sometimes in my moments where I feel despair, or I remember that woman sitting in the corner of that museum and what she had to sit in that room and feel that feeling. And I have, like you, when you read the book, I have nothing but gratitude for those that have gone before me and done harder things than me and are making better choices for our children. Because that's what we care about, right? These next babies coming in and doing better and finding humanity and putting a stop to hatred and some of the atrocities that happen in the world. I didn't watch the news as a human because I didn't like the way it made me feel. So why do I pick up my phone and scroll through this BS? I want to know what's going on in the world, but I don't want to be consumed by it. I want to improve it by my actions. Where can I improve that? In my community right here. Even if that's just starting my home, your community with you and your girls, that's where you're starting, right? And then once that feels okay, now you're going to open this doula practice, and now you're going to start families. Now I'm going to take care of you in a bigger way. And then little by little, you come out. That's how we change the world that we live in.
Thank you. Thank you. It feels good. It does to be a midwife in general, but then to be a Black midwife, like it just makes mountains of difference, you know? And like I said, that legacy part. And then having all of these other modalities, right? Like not just being a midwife, but being a doula and being a lactation counselor and being a yoga instructor and learning herbology and learning all of these other different modalities like sound healing and all of these really traditional things that make me a Black midwife. That's really important to me. I'm glad to be in this space. I really am. I'm really grateful to be in this space. I remember my grandmother, before she died, she was like, "You should be a nurse." And I was like, "Yeah, you got me messed up. I'm not doing that. That's too much school." I had already had my degree. And then it just is kind of full circle. No, I'm not a nurse. But the reason she said it is because when I was 10, I had this burn on my thigh. I spilled some hot tea on myself, but I had to take care of it all by myself. Like everybody else was squeamish, and I had to take care of it all by myself. And she was like, "You just did that and you did what you had to do and you took such good care of yourself and you take good care of people. You should be a nurse." And now here I am, not a nurse, but I get to take care of people. I get to hold people. and give them the space to feel loved. That's what we all want. Find out who the Black and BIPOC workers are in your space, in your state. Find out what they're doing. Find out what these organizations are. Find people who look like you as well that make you feel safe in a safe space as well. Our charges, what do we say? Our call to actions. Getting these spaces, volunteering, whether that's donating money, volunteering, being in spaces that are uplifting people of color and reading their stories. Yeah, and listening to their stories if you can. Knowing people and sitting in their spaces and listening to their stories. But yeah, that's it. I don't have anything else.
There we go. That was
Exhausted.
awesome.
Thank
That was
you for
perfect.
watching Delivered, where we deliver mothers, midwives, and magic. Thank you.